Hey everyone, tonight we're going to slip quietly into a story that, quite frankly, might make you reconsider every time you toss your shoes aside at the door. Imagine, just for a second, that the familiar scent of your sneakers after a summer jog was multiplied by layers of mud, animal hair, rotting straw, and a hint of something you'd rather not name, all sealed in heavy leather. Yes, tonight we're exploring what medieval shoes really smelled like. You might not survive hearing every detail, so brace yourself. So before you get too cozy, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And don't forget to drop a comment sharing where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now turn off the lights, switch on a gentle fan for a bit of white noise, and let's begin our journey tonight. You slip your feet into a pair of shoes that to your modern senses feel suspiciously stiff. You can practically hear the centuries creak through the soles. And already, even before you tighten the simple leather thongs, there is a whiff, earthy, sharp, and shockingly personal. The medieval world did not have Febrezes. It did not even have consistent soap. The hides these shoes were cut from came off animals only days before, sometimes not properly cured, sometimes smoked by open hearths, sometimes simply scraped and left to dry. That leathery tang is not the elegant scent of a modern boot shop. It's closer to a cow barn on a hot day. You begin walking across a dirt street, and every footfall collects a fresh sampling of medieval refuse: damp straw, horse droppings, a smear of ale from a tavern's thrown out washwater. The shoes were rarely cleaned because why bother? Roads were mud anyway. Most people couldn't afford to replace their shoes often, so they wore them until the soles nearly rotted off, patching with scraps, reshaping them over the fire. It means that smell, a mix of sweat, smoke, rancid oils, and filth, became deeply, horrifyingly personal. If you took off someone's shoes in the medieval period, you could practically read their biography in the stench. One well attested fact is that medieval shoes were almost always flat. The entire idea of a supportive heel was centuries away. Even among the rich, pointy shoes, like Poulin's, gave style but no arch support. Your feet, walking all day on hard packed dirt, slowly widened, calloused, and sometimes even split. Podiatrists would cry if they had to treat medieval peasants. But there is a stranger detail. Shoes were sometimes stuffed with moss or straw to soften them, which worked great until the moss got wet. Then it decayed right there against the skin. Some people believed herbs like rosemary or lavender could mask the odor, and sprinkled a handful inside. Maybe that helped for an hour, but the first puddle ruined it. Historians still debate whether those herbal fixes were genuinely common practice or only noted in a few richer households. There simply isn't enough evidence to prove it. As you shuffle along, you can almost feel that sour, cloying warmth creeping up from your own medieval soles. Shoes might be the final barrier between you and every slime the street offered, but they were also a prison for bacteria. In some towns, the regulations for tanning leather were so strict that tanners had to work downstream from everyone else because their waste was beyond foul. Just think, the same hides they dumped lye and urine on to tan were turned around and sewn into shoes. That smell, it never left completely. You pause in a busy medieval square, surrounded by neighbors who also haven't washed in weeks, and realize your feet might be the least of your worries. Between animal butchers, fishmongers, and horse drovers, the entire street is a riot of stenches. You'd almost get used to it if you lived there, but your modern nose recoils. Maybe you're grateful you can pull your socks off and run them through a washing machine, a gift medieval people could only have dreamed of. One silly but somehow believable legend says medieval knights' squires would hang their master's shoes on a spear overnight to air them out, as if elevating the boots high enough might spare everyone the stench. The more likely story? They just left them by the hearth to dry, and the next day the same funky shoes went right back on. You take another step, imagining how your own toes would fare. The hardened leather rubs against raw skin, and you sense a blister forming. It's a reminder. Medieval people developed tough feet and tougher noses. Even children wore shoes that would make you wince. They had to. Going barefoot meant cuts, infections, and worse. Your mind drifts for a moment, trying to pinpoint a modern smell that comes close. Maybe a locker room left sealed for a month? Add in some barnyard notes and a hint of sour beer, and you're almost there. If you think you could stomach living this way, you're braver than most. And if you're already curling your toes at the thought, don't worry, we're only just getting started. You keep walking, the medieval street rolling out under your soles like a gritty, endless welcome mat. Every step pushes warm air through the shoes, forcing that rank mixture of sweat, animal fat, and dirt to rise up and slap you in the nose again. It's a smell you can't unsmell, and yet somehow you start to accept it, the way people back then surely did. After all, most of them lived their entire lives within arm's reach of open sewers, compost heaps, and pigs rooting under the table. Their sense of bad was a few notches stronger than yours. Picture the ordinary leather used for those shoes. It was vegetable tanned, but the processes could vary wildly from place to place, and sometimes vegetable tanning just meant boiling bark and adding animal urine to soften the hides. There were guild regulations, sure, but guild regulations didn't mean they washed their hands or kept flies away. It just meant you couldn't undercut the neighbor's price too much. And so, shoes might reek of smoke and tannins, plus that faint ammonia sting that never fully left. One verified truth is that medieval shoes had thin soles. Even 2 layers of leather could wear through quickly. Pebbles, thorns, even sharp bones from discarded food could pierce them. That meant the average medieval walker felt everything: the cool ooze of mud, the uneven crunch of gravel, the sting of a puddle mixed with something you'd rather not identify. There's a weird footnote about how some folks, especially shepherds, would line their shoes with wool scraps for insulation. Sounds cozy, right? Until you remember they often didn't change those wool scraps for months. Picture a wet dog left in a sack all summer. That's basically what you're stepping into. Some medieval law codes even fined shepherds if they spread foot fungus through a flock, suggesting the problem was widespread, literally. But here's the open question scholars keep bickering about. How common were these luxury linings? Some records hint at them, but others suggest barefoot in wooden clogs was far more typical for peasants, especially in hot months. There just isn't enough archaeological proof to be conclusive, and bits of rotted cloth don't always survive the centuries. You pass through the market square, dodging piles of hay and droppings, and you notice people staring at your shoes, not out of jealousy, but because anything covering your feet was expensive enough to be worth stealing. Shoes were frequently second-hand goods, repaired over and over. There's even evidence of shoe thieves specializing in pulling them off drunks asleep in taverns. No one would blame you for sleeping with your shoes tied to your wrist. That detail alone might raise your eyebrows, but it makes sense if you think about how much labor went into every pair. Hunting, skinning, curing, cutting, sewing, all by hand usually. The best shoemakers shaped them around a wooden last, but poorer folks just cut patterns flat and hoped they'd mold to their feet with wear. That molding stage is also a smell factory, because every blister and callus added a little bit of its own perfume to the leather. You pick up a small stone in your shoe, and it's impossible to get rid of it. There's no proper insole, no bouncy cushion, no gel pad. You can only wiggle your foot until the stone finds a new, painful spot. And in the background, that stale, earthy, borderline rotten odor follows you step by step. If you needed to dry your shoes, you'd have to be careful. Too close to the fire, they'd warp and harden into an unwearable shape. Too far from the fire, they'd stay wet and breed mold. Imagine balancing that each evening after a long day. Your feet, raw and pruned, had no rest. One chronicler from a small village once described the spring thaw as a time when shoes resumed breathing, meaning the mud finally let go of them. You can practically see it, villagers pulling clods of half-frozen dirt off their boots, scraping them with knives just to find the laces. You'd call them destroyed and toss them. They called them a blessing. Your toes cramp a bit as you visualize trying to run in these medieval contraptions. Forget sports. Forget even a decent brisk walk. These shoes were built to last only barely, just enough to keep parasites from burrowing into your feet, no more. And of course, there's the final note of absurdity for this section. Medieval shoemakers would sometimes proudly stamp their mark on the inside, a badge of pride, but no deodorizing, no hygiene standards, no consistent fit. They made sure you knew who made them, but left the stink up to you. Just thinking about it makes you grateful for the boring white sneakers lined up in your closet. Or maybe you even want to sniff them right now, just to compare. If you do, don't worry. I won't judge. You keep moving through those medieval streets, your shoes slowly merging with the mud underfoot, as if they want to return to the earth from which they came. The soles flap a little on loose stitching, but there's no cobbler around who will fix them for free. You press on, wincing at every uneven cobble, and the smell grows stronger the longer you wear them. A living, breathing reminder that medieval hygiene was a negotiation with the elements, not a conquest of them. One established fact is that most medieval shoes lacked a left or right shape. They were symmetrical, meant to fit either foot equally. This saved on labor, but it guaranteed a miserable break-in period. Each time you swapped shoes between feet, you tortured a fresh set of blisters, which in turn mingled their own weepy infection with the ever-present stew of leather and sweat. Think about that next time you grumble about a new pair of boots. There's a curious side note from 14th century France about shoe taxes. Municipal records show that entire families might share a single pair of good shoes to appear presentable at church or pay a tax collector. The rest of the week, they went barefoot, letting their feet toughen into leather on their own. One observer claimed those shared shoes smelled so powerfully that the neighbors would tease them for days after Sunday Mass. Still, a shoe was a symbol of dignity, no matter how foul. Some historians still argue about whether these church shoes were actually common or just mentioned in rare village records. There's no archaeological consensus because leather rots so easily, but the stories are vivid enough to paint a plausible picture. You reach the threshold of a medieval house. Before stepping inside, you pause, noticing a small rush mat meant to wipe the worst of the mud from your shoes. But there's only so much a mat can do. The shoes come with you, tracking in the damp, the manure, the spilled ale, every memory of the street. And no one minds. The floor is already covered with straw to catch dirt and soak up spills. Shoes and floors were practically in a stinky partnership. At night, you might set your shoes beside the hearth. The heat pulls out the worst of the damp, but it also bakes in the odors, like reheating leftover soup a bit too long. You can practically smell the layers: charred leather, sour foot sweat, a faint sweetness from old beer splashes. That's the perfume of the medieval world, whether you liked it or not. You lie back on a creaky bed, trying to relax, but your feet pulse inside their rawhide prison. Even your dreams might be tinged by that lingering, unwashed scent. And tomorrow, you will do it all again, because shoes were too precious to replace easily, too dear to risk stealing, too vital to go without. One curious bit of trivia: shoemakers sometimes sprinkled crushed pepper or even ground up rosemary inside the finished shoe, trying to discourage lice and worms. Imagine walking around with a constant peppery itch between your toes. Maybe it worked, maybe it was wishful thinking. Historians can't quite agree. It's another academic debate that refuses to die. Your mind wanders as you picture medieval fairs, rows of shoes for sale, each pair a miracle of someone's hard work, but still no one quite able to mask the ever present rot. The buyers would test them, maybe squeeze them, maybe sniff them if they dared, then haggle for half an hour over a price that still felt like highway robbery. And if you were lucky enough to own a pair with a decent sole, you would protect them with your life. Parents handed down shoes to children, reshaped and stitched over and over, until barely any original leather remained. Sometimes you wonder if those shoes had a soul of their own, carrying memories of miles walked and mud crossed, hope and pain embedded in every stitch. You shift your feet now, just a little, feeling the phantom rub of a medieval seam against your modern toes. Even if you'd grown up there, even if you'd been used to it, there's no denying your feet would ache every night. And the smell, that sour, animal-like bouquet, would be as much a part of you as the sound of church bells or the taste of stale bread. So tonight, as you think about those medieval shoes, their cracked leather, their uneven fit, their stubborn, lingering perfume, maybe, just maybe, you'll say a small thank you to your favorite sneakers, because at least they don't double as a compost bin for your feet. And if you ever complain about having to break in a new pair again, remember the medieval motto: any shoe is better than no shoe. You wake up in a medieval dawn, your feet still imprisoned by those same battered shoes, and the air in your tiny, smoky cottage feels heavy and sour. The rush mat beneath your bed is gritty, woven through with bits of straw and the unmistakable scent of livestock. Your shoes greet you with their familiar bouquet of sweat, damp hide, and that dark undertone you can only call medieval foot funk. You slip them on because, honestly, what choice do you have? Bare feet on a street that hosts pigs, chickens, and human waste would be worse. Much worse. You step outside, and the first chill of the morning hits your ankles, mixing with the leftover warmth of your own feet trapped in those leather coffins. The mud in the street is just as sticky as yesterday, a gray brown paste of rainwater, horse urine, and compost. You wonder, almost jokingly, if your modern sense of smell could survive this, and I'm not sure you'd make it past the first mile, to be fair. One solid truth historians can agree on is that medieval people had to walk. A lot. Horses were precious, carts were often reserved for hauling goods, and most folks counted on their own 2 feet for every errand, every trip to the market, every pilgrimage. Their shoes were more like second skins than protective shells, thin enough to feel every rock, every splinter, and every worm riddled bit of straw. And here's a wonderfully weird detail: some medieval shoes had slits cut in the leather to breathe better. Sounds good in theory, right? Except those slits let in more mud and moisture, meaning the shoes rotted even faster. It was like poking holes in your umbrella because you didn't like how stuffy it was. Of course, scholars still debate whether those ventilated shoes were widespread or a local fashion. Archaeologists find fragments with slits, but they can't say if it was a trend or just desperation. Either way, the logic makes you laugh. As you shuffle toward the market square, you notice how much the air changes from place to place. A bakery sends out a cloud of warm bread, sweet and promising, but then a gust of wind pulls you right past the fishmonger's stand, where old scales and heads lie buzzing with flies. The stink hits your shoes, blends with them, and follows you like a loyal, terrible friend. Some medieval cities had laws requiring people to scrape the filth from their shoes before entering a public building. But let's be honest, the results were mixed. Most people wiped their shoes on whatever was handy: a doorstep, a dog, the hem of their neighbor's cloak. You can practically see it, can't you? Someone trying to look dignified while trailing a swirl of sewage behind them. You pause to rest against a crumbling wall, flexing your toes inside the leather. They're hot now, even on a chilly morning, because there's no airflow in medieval shoes. The skin gets soft, the nails break, and infections sneak in. Modern medical journals would have a field day, but back then, a foot infection was just another reason to pray harder. It's at moments like this you realize how much modern shoes protect you. No gel inserts, no arch support, no waterproof membranes in the medieval world, just raw leather, twisted into a basic shape, tied with string. And if the weather turned bad, you'd stuff more straw inside, knowing full well it would rot within days. A funny little tale goes that some medieval nobles demanded their servants carry their shoes on a pillow until the moment they stepped out of the carriage, hoping to preserve the shine. But the minute those dainty shoes hit the street, they ended up just as soaked and stinking as the peasants. No one was immune. One historical note you might find comforting is that shoemaking was a respected craft, even admired. Cobblers had guilds, apprenticeships, strict codes about the quality of stitches. They took pride in their work, even though the final product would soon be ruined by medieval filth. It's strangely human to care deeply about something doomed to fall apart. As you wander deeper into the market, a crowd jostles you, and you nearly lose a shoe in the muck. You tug it back on, wiggling your toes, and remember, shoes were sometimes tied directly to your leggings so you wouldn't lose them, like a child's mittens on a string, but for grown-ups who'd rather not step barefoot into a medieval gutter. If you picture it, you can almost feel how each day would grind your feet down, a slow war between bone, leather, and filth. And the smell, that unholy blend of sweat, mold, and something vaguely sour, would be the soundtrack to your daily existence. And yet, medieval people kept moving, mile after mile, market after market, because they had no other choice. You'd learn to ignore it too, or at least try. You keep pushing through the market crowd, trying to ignore how the shoes pinch your toes and the damp seeps through cracked seams. All around you, merchants shout about salted fish, barley, onions, while pigs root through discarded scraps under the stalls. The shoes on your feet squelch with every step, picking up a fresh layer of medieval street perfume. If you could peel them off right now, you might discover a miniature swamp living inside. Here's one honest historical truth. Most medieval towns suffered from chronic flooding. When it rained, the streets turned into sluggish, filthy rivers, and your shoes had to survive it. They didn't, really. They just endured. Leather that had never been properly waterproofed absorbed everything like a sponge. Some towns tried to fix flooding by adding stone walkways called causeways, but that only helped a lucky few. Everyone else sloshed through puddles that might include, well, more than just rainwater. And that gave rise to one of the stranger shoe solutions, medieval pattens. Imagine a crude wooden sandal, sometimes with iron nails sticking out, strapped over your leather shoe to lift you above the worst of the muck, like platform shoes from a nightmare. These were so clumsy that you'd clatter across the street, slipping and tripping, but at least your shoes had a fighting chance of staying drier. There's a debate among historians over whether pattens were used daily or mostly for church and markets. Some accounts suggest peasants couldn't afford them, while others say even simple folks made wooden clogs to spare their good shoes from the mud. As you pass a tanner's stall, you catch a whiff that makes your stomach flip. The entire tanning process was an adventure. Medieval tanners soaked hides in urine, then pounded them with dung, then let them rot just enough to soften before scraping them and drying them over smoky fires. That smell stayed in the leather forever. No amount of lavender sprigs or rosemary bundles could erase it. If you had a strong nose, you might try to hold your breath every time you bent down to buckle your shoes. You move on, trying not to imagine what lived in the seams of your footwear. Bacteria, lice, tiny worms, all very possible. A study of medieval skeletons shows infections and bone spurs from years of walking on hard ground with no support. If medieval people had known about arch support or custom insoles, they would have wept for joy. Instead, they simply toughened up and hoped for the best. One curious footnote: medieval guilds even had secret codes for shoe shapes. A squared toe meant one town, a pointed toe another. It helped traveling merchants identify each other. Whether that made your shoes smell any better, Absolutely not. You slip around a corner where a boy is scraping mud off his mother's shoes with a stick. They chatter about dinner, ignoring the thick sludge dripping onto their hands. Hygiene had a different standard. If you didn't step directly into a fresh cow pie, you were doing fine. A splash of ale here or there hardly mattered. Your own shoes, meanwhile, feel heavier and heavier, as if they're soaking up the street itself. You try to lift your feet, but each step threatens to pull the shoe clean off. That's why medieval people tied shoes tight, often crisscrossing laces all the way up their calf to keep them in place. It made the shoes look fancier, but it was pure practicality. No one wanted to lose a shoe in a ditch. Sometimes, the shoes themselves became a kind of identity marker. The richer you were, the more decorated, colorful, or pointy your footwear. The poorer you were, the simpler and browner. But in the end, the same rain fell on everyone, and the same mud welcomed every shoe, rich or poor. Standing in that marketplace, breathing the wild swirl of fish, smoke, sweat, and manure, you suddenly understand why medieval people might be nose blind. Generations living in constant odor must have taught them to filter out the worst. You, though, a modern visitor, might never fully adjust. One comedic rumor from medieval chronicles claimed that a lady fainted during a royal banquet when a knight removed his shoes too near the table. Exaggerated? Maybe. But if you've ever smelled medieval leather up close, you might believe it. Historians still argue if this was moralistic gossip or a genuine cautionary tale. Either way, it's a vivid reminder of how personal hygiene was not a high priority. Your shoes finally dry a little as the afternoon sun cuts through the clouds. The leather stiffens, forming awkward ridges against your heel. You wonder how anyone managed to dance or even kneel to pray without crying out. But medieval folks were tougher than you, no question. Even as you stand there, shifting your weight, you feel that same ache they did, the endless gritty press of street and shoe against fragile skin. A medieval life was measured by the journey of your feet, one painful, pungent mile after another. You head away from the market square, weaving through narrow alleys where the sun barely reaches the ground. The air feels thicker here, as if it's trying to crawl inside your shoes and set up camp. Each step feels sticky, like you're dragging a second pair of feet made of swampy leather. Even your modern imagination struggles to hold back a gag. But you press on, because medieval errands don't wait. You have to fetch bread, maybe buy a candle, and check the gossip at the well. You pass a group of children running barefoot through a side lane. Their feet are calloused almost to the point of hooves, no shoes at all, except for a rag tied around one boy's ankle. That rag might have once been a shoe, but now it's just a sad bandage against broken glass and jagged cobbles. You feel a strange relief that at least your own feet have something, anything, to protect them. One historical certainty is that most medieval children went barefoot until they outgrew their size quickly, or until cold weather forced a parent to scrape together a hand-me-down pair. Even then, those tiny shoes smelled no better than adults. In fact, they sometimes smelled worse, because kids ran through every puddle and barnyard without a second thought. And here's a curious oddity. Some monasteries actually required monks to go without shoes as an act of humility. Cold, wet, holy feet were a way to remind yourself of your sins. You wonder how many infections that vow of poverty must have caused. Historians still debate whether strict, barefoot monastic rules were as widespread as the records claim, or if local priests just looked the other way during winter. Your own shoes, meanwhile, continue to rub a blister on your heel. It's small, but you can already picture it turning raw and ugly, ready to soak in every medieval germ on the street. The lack of socks makes it worse. Woven hose were common, but they didn't hug the foot like modern socks, and they wore through fast. Holes invited even more filth to sneak in. You pause near a blacksmith's workshop, feeling a blast of heat on your face. Sparks fly as the smith hammers iron, the warm metallic tang mixing with the all too familiar stink of shoes baking in the sun. You realize leather warps in heat, which means if you leave your shoes too close to the forge, they might shrink and twist into shapes you could never wear again. So medieval folks carefully balanced drying with scorching, a delicate daily gamble. There's a sweet moment, though, as you watch an old woman help her grandson tie up his shoe. She uses a bit of waxed string, looping it around the child's ankle with practiced hands. The wax gives the string some water resistance, which for a few blessed days might protect against the endless damp. That tiny gesture is full of love, despite the stink. And still, you can't escape that unmistakable sense of decay. The shoes, the street, the animals, the people, it's all a giant stew of organic matter, half rotten and fully unforgettable. It's enough to make you wonder how anyone found a date in medieval times. Maybe they just didn't notice anymore. One little known tidbit: medieval shoemakers sometimes added metal studs to soles to help them last longer on cobbled streets. Sounds practical, but it made shoes slip dangerously on wet stone. Imagine dancing on an oily kitchen floor in tap shoes. Same energy. Historians haven't settled on whether these nailed shoes were a city fad or a broader trend, because surviving examples are patchy at best. You move on, wincing every time a stone jabs the soft spot on your arch. Medieval shoes offered nothing by way of shock absorption. The streets felt personal, sending every poke and prod straight into your bones. At the end of the day, your feet would be swollen, bruised, filthy, and worst of all, still stuck inside those leather coffins until you reached home. If you needed to mend your shoes, you'd probably do it yourself. Peasants learned to stitch and patch, using any scrap of thread or leather they could find. Sometimes they even sewed the upper directly to their hose, creating a weird sock shoe hybrid. That might work for a day or two, but then the entire thing would fall apart, rotting from the inside out. There's a moment of dark humor in realizing you'd pay big money for a medieval replica shoe today, yet the folks back then would have happily burned theirs if they could afford a replacement. The value of shoes was so high that some people asked to be buried wearing them, as if they'd need them for the afterlife. By now, your medieval day has drawn to a close, and your shoes are heavier than when you put them on. Each foot feels like it carries half the town's dirt, plus every sticky spill you stepped through. You shuffle back toward your cottage, aching, tired, and deeply aware that your shoes will be just as bad tomorrow. But somehow, you accept it because everyone around you is living the same story. If medieval folks could survive this daily grime, maybe you could too, for a day. Maybe. You trudge through the last rays of medieval sunlight, your shoes practically fused to your feet after a full day of mud, sweat, and the lingering perfume of streets best left unimagined. The evening air cools around your ankles, but the shoes hold their damp heat, wrapping your toes in a sour, sour hug. It's a sensory assault you'd never get used to, even if medieval folks did. Passing the alehouse, you see a few men drinking and laughing, their shoes kicked off to dry by the door. The stench hits you like a slap. Nobody says a word about it. No one even flinches. They've lived their entire lives breathing in that thick, fermented foot stew. And to be fair, their noses are probably half as sensitive as yours by now. One reliable historical truth is that medieval taverns doubled as repair stops. If your shoe fell apart, you might find a traveling cobbler in a corner, patching soles by candlelight in exchange for a mug of ale. That was community support in action. No Yelp reviews, just word of mouth about who could slap a patch on fastest. Strangely, some folks even believed bad smelling shoes warded off evil spirits. There's a record of a farmer who hung his shoes over the barn door to keep witches away. Whether that worked, well, historians are still laughing about it. Some argue it was a genuine superstition. Others say it was just an excuse to air the shoes outside. You pause in the doorway of a small shop, watching a woman barter for a scrap of wool to stuff in her shoe. Her toes peek out of a hole the size of a coin, but she doesn't complain. Winter is coming, and even stinky wool is better than nothing. There's no sense of embarrassment, no shame. Everyone's shoes are falling apart together. Back on the road, you cross a small bridge, ducking to avoid a low beam. Beneath you, the river smells almost sweet compared to your own feet. That's saying something. Medieval rivers were practically liquid trash heaps, loaded with every kind of refuse, yet they sometimes managed to smell cleaner than the boots that sloshed through the town. One curious snippet from medieval law: certain trades had to register their shoe color or style so local officials could recognize them. Bakers, for example, might wear light shoes to stand out from the dark-soled market workers. Imagine trying to enforce that in a world where everything turned brown after a week anyway. It was a nice idea, but completely doomed. Your mind wanders to dance halls and feast days. Did people dance in these shoes? They absolutely did, clumsy as it sounds. Picture a floor slick with spilled wine and goose fat, your soles already softened by rain and road filth, and somehow still trying to twirl with a partner. It's a medieval miracle no one snapped an ankle every time they tried. You step around a fresh pile of horse manure, testing the thinness of your own sole. It holds, but barely. Medieval leather was tough, but not invincible. Most people carried a small awl or needle to fix a popped seam on the go. You might have to stop in the middle of a muddy street, push a stitch through, tie a knot, and keep moving. By nightfall, your feet have grown clammy and cramped. It feels like you're carrying the entire village with you, one footstep at a time. Every scratch, every rock bruise, every stale breath of mold has become part of your story. In a strange way, it's humbling. Medieval life was tough, but it kept moving, stink and all. One final question for tonight's walk. Did medieval people ever wash their shoes? Occasionally, yes, though not in any way you'd recognize. A rinse in a stream, a quick scrape with a knife, Maybe a rub down with an oily rag. That was about it. Anything more seemed wasteful when soap was precious and water might be needed for cooking. Shoes were expected to be disgusting. That was normal. So as you reach your doorway, peeling the shoes off with a reluctant sigh, you realize they're more than a covering. They are a living diary of medieval life. Each step, each stain, each horrifying odor locked into the leather. You slip them to the side, knowing tomorrow they'll go back on, carrying a fresh layer of the world with them. And you, yes, you, would have survived. Maybe, if you could learn to live with the smell, the bruises, the raw skin, you might even find a little pride in those humble, battered medieval shoes. After all, in this world, they were your ticket to freedom, however foul they seemed. You wake to the soft, gray dawn of another medieval morning, and before you even open your eyes, you feel the weight of your shoes calling from the corner. They're waiting, as loyal and grim as ever, ready to collect a fresh day's worth of grime. You slip your aching feet inside and wince. They're cold, stiff, and still faintly wet from the night before, a sour chill greeting your toes. Nothing says good morning quite like leather soaked in yesterday's sweat. You step outside, the village already coming to life. Chickens clatter in the yard, a neighbor pours slops onto the street, and smoke coils from the baker's chimney. Your shoes pick up new scents and textures within moments. A thin smear of animal droppings here, a splatter of watery porridge there. You know by now you'll carry those additions for the rest of the day, woven into the patchwork of filth. A confirmed historical truth is that medieval shoes rarely lasted a year before falling apart. Most people patched them so many times they could barely tell which piece was the original leather. Shoes became like living creatures, mended, reshaped, and rebuilt over and over. If the stitching failed, you made do. After all, going barefoot was a death sentence in the colder months. A strange little aside. In parts of medieval Germany, some folks believed that burying old shoes beneath the doorstep protected the house from evil spirits. It's hard to know if that was serious magic or just a creative way to throw out something too awful to keep indoors. Scholars still bicker over it, citing patchy records and local legends, but it's a colorful footnote in the grand, stinky saga of shoe history. You shift your weight, testing the seams, wondering if you can survive the day without springing a fresh leak. A sharp pebble slides under your arch, reminding you that medieval shoes offered no real insole, no cushion, just a thin, bruising slab of leather. That meant every street felt personal. The stone, the filth, the twisted roots beneath the mud, all of it pressing into your bones. Walking on was an act of willpower. If you tore a hole, you'd shove in a rag. If the sole peeled off, you'd tie it back on with twine. People got creative, and you sensed their determination in every step, their refusal to give up just because the road was merciless. You turned toward the market, passing a cluster of workers hauling barrels of ale. Their shoes match yours in smell and shape, battered, half-dried, reeking of everything their owners had stepped through that week. The only difference is they've stopped noticing the stink, while you still flinch with every fresh wave. One woman stands by a doorway, beating her husband's shoes against a rock to loosen the dirt. That's cleaning, medieval style. No soap, no rinse, just a quick bashing to knock off the worst lumps. It probably helped a little, but after years of absorbing medieval muck, the leather was more or less permanently scented. You look down and realize a fresh crack has split across your own shoe. Medieval glue was weak and water soluble, usually made from boiled animal bones, so once a shoe broke, it broke again and again. Still, you had to patch it, because making a new pair was far too costly. There's a quiet humor in all this. You'd pay hundreds today for a reproduction medieval shoe, hand stitched by a reenactor, but back then people would have burned them if they could. The medieval mind saw shoes as necessary, but never as precious objects to treasure. They were tools, disposable and doomed, and you feel that philosophy settling around you as you limp forward. The road bends, leading you past a butcher where fresh animal hides hang, dripping and pungent. You catch the same bass note that lives inside your shoes, raw hide, barely tanned, mixed with something metallic and earthy. It all blends into a perfume so thick you taste it at the back of your throat. And still, you move on, because you have no choice. Every medieval day demanded that you keep walking, no matter how broken your shoes, no matter how battered your feet. You wonder, a little bitterly, if anyone ever truly felt comfortable in these shoes, or if they just stopped caring altogether. Your feet ache, your ankles burn, your toes are beginning to blister again, and yet you keep going. The medieval world was harsh, but you survive it step by step, leather cradling you with its dark, sour embrace. You follow the rutted path out of town, breathing air that is only slightly cleaner than the markets. Fields stretch around you, dotted with sheep and cattle, each beast adding its own contribution to the perfume of the countryside. Your shoes sink into the softer earth, picking up a fresh coat of mud that seeps into every stitch, clinging to the bits of straw you tried to wedge inside for padding. Each step feels like dragging a damp, gritty weight along your feet. You look ahead to the manor on the hill, wondering what the noble folk wore on their delicate feet. One historical certainty is that wealthier people favored fine leather, sometimes even silk-covered shoes, and yes, they stank too. Those fancy fabrics, exposed to the same streets, turned foul in days. Servants might air them out on hedges or brush them with vinegar, a desperate attempt to kill the worst of the smell. But vinegar can only do so much. A curious little note from the record books that says that one bishop required his staff to sprinkle rose petals inside his shoes. Did that help? Maybe for an hour before the next step through pig manure. Historians argue whether these flower-lined shoes were a real trend or just a bishop's personal quirk, since there's no evidence the average knight bothered. You shift your weight as the path grows rocky, the leather offering no protection from sharp flints. Every pressure point bites, and your arches scream for relief. You almost laugh, because you know medieval people just accepted this pain as part of daily life. No pain, no gain, right? Up ahead, a few peasants work the fields barefoot, their feet a map of scars and thick calluses. They look at your battered shoes with something close to envy. You wonder what they'd think of your modern sneakers. You'd probably seem like royalty to them, just for owning dry, padded, machine-stitched miracles. There's a moment of pity, mixed with respect, for how tough these folks had to be. Their shoes, if they had any, were patched into oblivion, tied on with string, layered with wool so rotted it barely stayed whole. The stink? That was a badge of labor, of honest struggle, and no one judged you for it. If anything, a whiff of well traveled feet proved you were putting in the work. You keep climbing the hill, each step reminding you how medieval shoes had no heel, no arch shaping, nothing. Just a flat slap of leather. The moment you hit a slope, your toes jam forward, grinding into the stiffened tips of your shoe. That sharp, vinegar meets barnyard odor puffs upward every time the leather flexes, forcing you to breathe in your own medieval nightmare. One fun but odd piece of trivia: medieval folks sometimes stuffed mint or even thyme into their shoes before long journeys, hoping to keep the smell tolerable. Problem was, once the herbs got wet, they rotted too, creating a weirdly sweet, rotten, swamp like stew. Even modern scientists can't agree if this made things better or worse. You crest the hill, looking down at the village, thinking how all those tiny houses held the same secret. Shoes lined up by the hearth, steaming gently, giving off the shared perfume of medieval survival. It's a smell you might never forget, no matter how many modern showers you take afterward. And there, beyond the village, the world keeps stretching. Pilgrims would walk for hundreds of miles in these same shoes, sometimes with soles worn so thin they could feel every cobblestone. Yet they pressed on, driven by faith, by fear, or simply by the need to keep moving. There's something noble about it, painful, but noble. Your own shoes squish as you turn back toward town. The thought of another night with those sour, damp soles nearly makes you whimper, but you understand now why medieval folks valued them so much. Shoes were life. They separated you from disease, parasites, cold, and splinters. They were horrible, but they were essential. You step carefully over a dead rat, the leather creaking under your toes, and remind yourself you would have survived too if you had to, maybe, but you'd complain the way you're complaining now. There's no shame in that. Even medieval people surely cursed their shoes now and then. So you limp down the hill, headed for another night by the hearth, shoes steaming with the day's collected filth, grateful in some strange, exhausted way to have them at all. You wander back through the village gates, your shoes heavy and sloppy against your skin, clinging like damp bandages. The last rays of sun catch on the battered leather, highlighting every scratch, every new tear, every crust of mud picked up since dawn. You feel your arches throb with each step, a dull, pulsing reminder that medieval shoes weren't designed for comfort. They were designed to barely do the job. As you pass by a blacksmith's stall, the iron tang of fresh forged metal slices through the usual sour stench. For a moment, it almost feels clean, until the breeze shifts and sends another wave of hot, rotten leather up from your own shoes. You shake your foot, but the stink clings as loyally as a shadow. One solid historical truth is that most medieval villages had only a handful of true cobblers. If you couldn't pay them, you patched your shoes yourself. That meant crooked stitches, odd lumps, mismatched leather, and absolutely no uniformity. Sometimes people even stitched pieces of old belt or scabbard onto their soles to keep them going one more season. There's a bizarre side note buried in old texts. Certain medieval laws banned extremely long shoe points because they tripped people or caught on staircases. Imagine stepping on your own 2 foot long shoe tip and falling face first into a pile of pig muck. Apparently, it happened often enough to get written down. Historians still debate whether those laws were enforced or whether they were just moral scolding about fashion gone wild. You turn toward the public well, watching villagers haul water in wooden buckets. Most of them wear shoes about as terrible as yours, with holes that let water in but never let it back out. That swampy foot bath would stay with them all day, softening skin until it blistered and bled. You wonder if medieval folks ever envied animals for going barefoot. As you approach your own doorway, you notice someone has left a pair of shoes hanging from a hook outside to dry. A hopeful gesture, but with the rain on its way, they'll probably just get wetter, picking up a fresh layer of sour mildew. There's no escape. Inside, you drop onto a rough stool, sliding your feet free with a wince. Your shoes let out a puff of medieval perfume so strong it feels almost alive. A nasty cocktail of old sweat, animal fat, street sludge, and the subtle tangy note of rotting straw, the medieval signature scent. And yet, these shoes are yours. They have carried you through cold mornings, past butchers and tanners and market brawls, through mud so deep you nearly lost your balance, through crowds so thick you thought you'd vanish. They are miserable, yes, but they are yours. You glance around the little house, seeing similar pairs lined up near the hearth, some so patched they look like Frankenstein's monster. In those layers of leather live the footprints of a whole family, father, mother, sister, brother, passed down and reshaped to fit new feet. It's a kind of living history, a timeline sewn right into the souls. There's one final strange tradition worth sharing. In parts of medieval England, people would toss old shoes onto a roof to bring good luck, hoping the spirit of the shoe would guard their home. It sounds absurd, but maybe they just didn't want to bring them inside again. Historians still puzzle over that practice, arguing whether it was a true charm or simply a convenient way to ditch a stinking, worn-out pair. You breathe deep, letting your own shoes cool beside the fire, and accept that tomorrow they'll be ready to cradle your feet all over again. Bruised, battered, and thoroughly disgusting, yet essential. And somehow, this simple, filthy thing becomes a meditation on medieval life itself. No matter how hard, how painful, how foul, you kept going. Day after day, step after step, you walked through the world, carrying its dirt and its hope together in every single footfall. Hey everyone, tonight we're going to drift back through time into a world of flickering oil lamps, drifting incense, and ancient chants echoing through stone halls. Close your eyes and picture it, Egypt, thousands of years ago, where pharaohs ruled the land and common folk watched the Nile breathe life into their crops. But behind that grand civilization lay something far more intimate, the struggle to fall asleep. Yes, tonight, we're exploring how the ancient Egyptians invented sleep remedies long before modern melatonin bottles cluttered our nightstands. You might not survive spending a single night on one of their straw-filled mats with scorpions under the bed, but it's worth imagining, isn't it? So before you get too cozy, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And don't forget to drop a comment sharing where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now turn off the lights, Switch on a gentle fan for that soothing white noise, and let's begin our journey tonight. You slip into the night air of ancient Egypt, its warmth clinging to you like a damp sheet. You pass by mud brick houses, their doorways dark, their tiny windows glowing with the faintest lamplight. The city feels quiet, heavy with sleep, except you still wander. Your mind refuses to rest. Maybe it's the endless heat or the worry about crocodiles in the irrigation channels, but something keeps you awake. So, like an Egyptian searching for peace, you go to find a remedy. Your feet carry you toward a small stall near the edge of a marketplace where a healer waits with a basket of herbs. Egyptians believed poppy seeds could calm a restless mind, mixing them into honey to sweeten the bitterness. The sticky concoction might make your eyelids droop after a few spoonfuls, but there's a catch: too much poppy, and you'd fall into a dangerous stupor instead of a peaceful sleep. No dosage labels here, just a healer's best guess. You pause, inhaling the sticky scent of crushed herbs and sweat carried on the night breeze. Everything in this world smells sharper than your modern room: the warm river mud, the sweat soaked linen tunics, the faint burn of lamp oil, and under it all, the honey poppy mix feels oddly comforting, even if it might knock you out for 12 hours straight. One historical truth is that Egyptians were deeply aware of insomnia, even if they didn't call it that. Papyrus records show they wrote down sleep charms, prayers, and herbal mixtures to coax the mind into rest. They recognized what you feel right now, that terrible whirl of thoughts, refusing to let you drift off. And here's a wonderfully weird fact. Some Egyptians believed a clay statue of the god Bes, protector of households, could keep nightmares away. They'd place it by the bed, glaring at evil spirits all night long. Imagine trying to relax under the gaze of a squat, pot-bellied figurine with its tongue sticking out. Maybe you'd sleep out of sheer fear instead. Scholars still argue whether Bes statues truly had a widespread role in common sleep practice or were mostly a temple tradition. You carry that image with you as you leave the healer's stall, a small jar of poppy honey clutched in your hand. The air grows thicker, settling around you like a heavy blanket, but your mind is still buzzing. So you turn to something older than honey: words. The Egyptians were masters of incantations, weaving spells to hush the mind. A scribe might write a short prayer on a scrap of linen, tie it around your wrist, and tell you to repeat a chant until your eyelids fell. It's part lullaby, part hypnosis, part spiritual insurance. You slip past doorways where others are already lost in sleep, the quiet breaths of a family behind clay walls reminding you of your own restless heart. Maybe they'd all taken their dose of poppy and honey, or maybe they trusted in the protective grin of Bes to hold nightmares back. You wish your thoughts were that easy to calm. Even the river seems to sleep, the water moving so slowly it reflects moonlight in perfect streaks. A breeze tickles the back of your neck, carrying hints of lotus blossom from a house nearby. Egyptians loved their perfumes. One drop of blue lotus oil on the temples was said to ease tension, helping you drift off in the thick summer heat. The blue lotus wasn't just for pretty garlands. It was a medicine, a sedative, a sweet night-blooming helper. You breathe it in, wondering if your mind would quiet with a drop or two. The scent is hypnotic, floral, and earthy, mixed with the Nile's ever-present damp. You think you might relax, finally, if only for a moment. But even here, worries about tomorrow creep into your mind. You keep walking, your sandals slapping against packed earth. The night grows deeper, darker, as if wrapping you in its arms. If you lived here, you might have trusted these ancient sleep tricks more than any modern pill. And maybe you'd have needed them in a world of biting insects, wild animals, and 1,000 unseen gods. Sleep was a fragile gift you had to protect. You keep moving through the dark Egyptian night, each step carrying you closer to the edge of the city, where desert winds tease the edges of settled life. The air tastes of baked earth and distant fires, heavy on your tongue. You clutch your jar of poppy honey as though it might save you, though deep down you suspect even the strongest herbs cannot quiet every worry that rattles around in your head. The healer's advice echoes behind you, only a spoonful, or you might not wake until the sun is high. There's a certain thrill in knowing how dangerous these ancient remedies could be, like playing sleep roulette. You laugh quietly, because let's be honest, you'd never survive this place for more than a day without air conditioning and a proper bed. You find a flat stone to sit on, staring at the horizon where the desert meets the night. It feels so impossibly vast, and you wonder if that same emptiness haunted Egyptians after sunset, filling their minds with fear. Restless hearts have never changed, no matter the century. One truth, woven through the papyri, is that Egyptians thought sleep itself was a visit to the underworld. They feared your soul might wander too far in dreams, needing protection to guide it safely back. That's why priests scribbled special charms, so your spirit wouldn't get lost between the worlds. It's poetic, really, imagining sleep as a risky voyage instead of a simple rest. You touch the poppy honey to your lips, but pause. The smell is thick, sweet, with a bitterness lurking underneath, like stale almonds. It reminds you that plants used in ancient medicine were powerful, but also unpredictable. Egyptian doctors blended their treatments with prayers because nobody completely trusted herbs alone. Nearby, a group of laborers settles onto reed mats, their bodies exhausted from hauling stones at the construction site. They wrap themselves in thin linen, trusting in their night charms and small clay idols to keep nightmares away. You envy them, their easy collapse into sleep, the way their minds switch off despite the aches in their muscles. Here's something delightfully odd. Some Egyptians believed onions placed near the bed could ward off bad spirits and calm the mind. You can almost see it, a half-rotten onion perched next to a beautiful lotus garland, two worlds colliding in a bid for better dreams. Modern scholars still debate if this was a common household practice, or if only a few tried such stinky protection. You rise, moving slowly toward the riverbank. The water smells green and ancient, alive with small frogs and reeds. Its gentle flow is hypnotic, a natural lullaby older than any prayer. Egyptians slept close to these waters, lulled by the croaking of frogs and the rustle of papyrus leaves. You can almost imagine yourself lying down there, the mud still warm from the sun, letting the rhythm of the current pull you toward a dream. But even here, peace is fragile. The priests warned about demons that slipped into your mind while you slept, planting terrifying visions or stealing your breath. A carved amulet of a sleeping child was supposed to guard you, tucked under your head like a sacred dream catcher. You wonder how many children fell asleep with their tiny fists wrapped around one of these charms, praying not to see a monster in the night. You breathe a little deeper, feeling the blue lotus perfume that still clings to the evening air. Maybe you'd trust it too, a drop on each temple, just enough to blur your worries. If you closed your eyes right now, you might even feel yourself drifting, a soft pull through the veil between wakefulness and dreams. And still, part of you stays awake, watching the shadows move, listening for the hiss of a snake, the flap of a bat's wing. Egypt at night was no place for the faint of heart, but somehow its people found ways to rest, to recharge, to heal in sleep. You begin to understand why their remedies were woven from prayer, medicine, and a dash of desperate hope. You stand up from your seat on the cool stone, stretching your shoulders as the night deepens around you. The breeze carries a thin, almost metallic tang from the river, mixing with the sweetness of date palms and the smoky oil lamps still glowing in distant homes. It's the hour when even the priests grow drowsy, their chants tapering off into silence, leaving the city to its own soft, uneasy rest. Your feet trace a narrow path along the canal, where reeds brush against your ankles. You keep one hand on your jar of poppy honey, half afraid to spill it, half afraid to taste it. Sleep in ancient Egypt was a balancing act between hope and fear. One sip too many of the poppy brew, and your spirit might wander beyond Osiris's gate, never to return. That thought chills you, and you laugh to yourself. You'd never last here, not with your modern brain that panics over a missed text message, let alone the idea of your soul escaping into the underworld overnight. You catch a glimpse of a small shrine built into a mud brick wall, a clay figure of Bes perched above a painted offering bowl. Its bulging eyes, shaggy hair, and cheeky grin guard the sleeper from every demon, every shade that might slip through a half-closed eyelid. It looks silly, almost like a children's toy, but you feel its presence anchoring the place in a strange, comforting way. Some historians wonder if these statues were only for children, or if adults needed their silly power too. There's no agreement, only scraps of stories left behind. Passing the shrine, you find yourself drawn to a group of women who gather to grind herbs under the faint starlight. Their voices are hushed, almost reverent, as they crumble leaves and seeds into tiny bowls. Henbane, blue lotus, coriander, these were the classics. They talk of their families, their fears, and how they pray the gods will let them rest after long days of fieldwork or weaving. You watch one woman dab a little henbane salve on her wrists. The scent is earthy, musky, just shy of unpleasant, but it's meant to pull her mind away from worry and down into sleep. Your own nose wrinkles. These ancient sedatives would never pass modern safety tests, you think, but for them, anything was better than hours of turning on a straw mat, waiting for dreams that might never come. You keep walking, the Nile now a silver mirror under the moon. Its surface barely ripples, hypnotic and slow, as if the river itself is dozing. You could almost see why the Egyptians made it part of their dream language. A journey by boat in sleep was a symbol of transition, of crossing safely through dangerous thoughts. The boat of Ra, the sun god, traveled the night waters every evening, fighting monsters to rise again. Maybe your dreams feel the same sometimes, battling the creatures your brain invents. You pause, pressing your toes into the packed dirt. Even here, in the cool air, you can feel the ghost of heat left by the sun. You let that warmth steady you, imagining it as a blanket drawn over your restless thoughts. A silly story drifts to mind, something a scribe once recorded. A man claimed a crocodile stole his sleep, snapping it away in the night. No one could decide if he meant a real crocodile or a dream one, but either way, the solution was the same: an amulet, an offering, and a hope that tomorrow would be easier. Scholars still debate if these animal shaped fears were a true part of folk belief or simply storytelling, and you can see why. It sounds so ridiculous, yet somehow so human. You let out a sigh. Maybe you think there's no perfect cure for insomnia, ancient or modern. Maybe all we ever do is cling to small comforts: a poppy syrup, a blue lotus flower, a silly figurine, and pray that sleep will come. The stars overhead shine with that steady, patient calm only ancient people might have truly understood. You wish a little of that calm for yourself as you gather your courage to finally dip a finger into the sticky sweetness of your poppy honey. It's bitter, sharp, but warm too, a strange promise of peace if you can just let go. You stay seated for a moment, letting the strange aftertaste of poppy honey rest on your tongue. It's thick, sticky, clinging to your lips, as if sleep itself might get stuck on the way down. Around you, the hush of ancient Egypt grows deeper, settling over mud brick walls and date palm groves like a comforting, heavy cloak. Your eyes flutter, but your mind still refuses to settle. You stand again, wandering through streets that twist like threads of linen under the soft, pulsing glow of oil lamps. The air is close, almost syrupy, humming with insects and the faint rattle of someone's beads in prayer. You wonder if the woman you saw earlier, dabbing henbane on her wrists, is already lost in dreams. Maybe you envy her. A reliable truth from Egyptian medicine is that they wrote entire books, scroll after scroll, dedicated to sleep disturbances. One preserved fragment even lists how to measure dreams by their colors, with black dreams seen as warnings and white dreams as blessings. The idea that sleep could be read and studied feels oddly modern, doesn't it? But there's something even stranger. Some healers recommended stuffing your pillow with dried, crushed herbs like chamomile and even lettuce leaves. Yes, lettuce. Egyptians believed lettuce cooled the body, relaxing it for easier rest. Imagine trying to doze off on a crunchy lettuce pillow, a recipe for a midnight salad if you turn too hard in your sleep. Historians still bicker about whether this was a widespread cure or only a local custom. After all, linen was expensive, and people rarely wasted even scraps on stuffing. As you slip down a narrow alley, the wind shifts, carrying the Nile's damp coolness straight into your hair. It soothes you, brushing against your forehead like a mother's hand. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries, and a soft chant follows it, a lullaby older than any song you know. Egyptians believed music had real power to calm both body and soul. Harps, flutes, a simple chanting, they were all woven into bedtime rituals. You pause, listening, your own breath slowing with the rhythm. Your feet ache, your mind drifts, but you keep walking. You find yourself near a household shrine where someone has left a loaf of bread and a small clay cup of beer for a household god. It's a simple gift, but also a plea. Protect my sleep, guard my dreams. You can almost see the family inside, dozing side by side on their shared mat, trusting that these humble offerings would be enough to keep nightmares away. You smile because humans haven't changed that much. We still ask something bigger than ourselves to keep watch while we rest, whether you call that God, fate, or just luck. There's a funny rumor scrawled in a court record telling how a high official believed his wife snored because she'd angered the gods. To fix it, he paid a temple priest to write a charm against evil wind in the throat. I'd love to see the Yelp reviews for that treatment today. Scholars still argue whether these charms genuinely worked or simply gave people a little confidence to fall asleep. The night deepens, and you find a low step to sit on, feet dangling over packed earth. Your eyes start to feel heavy, but you fight it. The sounds around you seem to sharpen, a donkey braying in the distance, the faint lap of water on a reed boat, the small click of insects in the walls. It's a living lullaby, part of Egypt itself. You rub your thumb across the clay seal on the jar of poppy honey, wondering if you dare another taste. The healer warned you too much and you might dream so deeply you'd lose your way home. But the idea of drifting away, floating far from this buzzing, prickling world, is tempting. You sigh, rolling your shoulders, trying to get comfortable on that hard step. If you were a scribe, you might write your own sleep spell now, listing every worry on a scrap of linen, binding it up so no demon or bad dream could slip through. And as you look up, the night sky, vast, steady, dotted with stars the same way it has been for 5,000 years, seems to whisper back that yes, you will sleep, eventually. You shift your weight on that low stone step, feeling the day's aches settle into your bones. Your eyelids twitch, heavy from the poppy honey, but your mind stays lit like a lantern, refusing to dim. Around you, Egypt breathes. You can almost feel the entire land exhaling, the hush of servants rolling out mats, the rustle of linen tunics dropped to the floor, the faint scraping of clay lids closing over water jars. The city itself seems to lull you, even as your own thoughts refuse to settle. You stand again, drawn forward by the faint shimmer of lamplight in a house you pass. Through a small window, you catch a glimpse of a woman stroking a lotus blossom along her cheek, then tucking it beside her pillow. Egyptians believed the blue lotus held powers to ease pain and encourage gentle dreams. They sometimes soaked it in wine for an extra, floating calm, blurring the line between sleep and trance. You wonder how it smelled up close, probably floral, with that faint river-soaked sweetness of Egypt itself. One confirmed truth is that Egyptians took their sleep rituals seriously. Some families even sprinkled powdered myrrh on their mats, believing it purified the air and drove off insects. You can see why, with flies, fleas, and mosquitoes everywhere, a good night's rest was a fragile miracle. There's an odd bit of folk wisdom scrawled on a broken pot. Some claimed that a cat sleeping at your feet could guard your dreams, chasing away evil spirits with its own divine energy. Picture a dozing tabby curled up by your ankles, protecting your night from nightmares. Of course, cats in Egypt were basically royalty, so you'd have to treat your feline bodyguard with respect. Historians still puzzle over whether this was widespread or just a fun bit of village gossip. You slip away from the window, the poppy honey still warming your stomach, and wander along a narrow lane lined with mud brick walls. Here, A priest recites a soft chant over a child too afraid to close his eyes, promising that the gods will tie the child's soul to his body until dawn. The idea that your spirit might wander off in sleep still rattles you. It makes your own tossing and turning feel downright easy in comparison. As you pass a fig tree, a breeze shakes its branches, releasing a whiff of sweet, overripe fruit. The smell relaxes you, reminding you how Egyptians valued the familiar comforts of their harvest. Figs were thought to bring sweetness to dreams, a hopeful bit of optimism in a world so often harsh. You imagine biting into one before bed, sticky juice on your tongue, a small token of good things to come. But even figs had their dark side. One tale claims evil spirits could hide in a fig's hollow, waiting to leap into your mouth while you slept. Maybe that's why so many people kept charms close. You laugh under your breath. You'd never survive sleeping here, not with that idea rattling around in your modern brain. The night drapes itself over you a little more, as if encouraging you to rest. You pause near another shrine where incense burns low, curling fragrant smoke into a quiet swirl. The perfume is sharp, earthy, a little bit bitter, likely frankincense, still used today. Egyptians trusted smoke to carry prayers upward, while at the same time driving away insects and dark dreams. You wonder if that earthy haze might calm your own overbusy thoughts. You lean against a doorway for a moment, the clay cool under your fingertips, and let your shoulders relax. Maybe the priests were right to blend prayer and medicine. After all, sleep is a fragile miracle even now. No one completely understands how to summon it on command, no matter how many herbs, oils, or spells you gather. Your head grows heavier, eyelids dipping, but your feet still remember the street's uneven stones. Somewhere in the shadows, a woman hums a lullaby to a baby, the melody flowing like water, steady and simple. You let it fill your chest, an echo of thousands of years of sleepless hearts learning how to rest. You draw in a slow breath, letting that lullaby drift through you, wrapping around your restless thoughts like a woven cloth. The scent of frankincense lingers in the air, sharp and earthy, mixing with the sweet tang of figs and the muddy perfume of the Nile. Each sense seems to blend, drawing you further into the quiet, timeless night. Your feet carry you onward, past sleeping dogs curled tight against doorways, their ribs gently rising and falling. Beyond them, a line of papyrus mats glows faintly in the moonlight, laid out side by side like steps on a staircase to dreams. It hits you that no matter the century, we all crave the same thing, a place to rest and the hope of waking whole. One solid truth is that Egyptians believed dreams could predict the future. They even kept professional dream interpreters, skilled men and women who decoded symbols for a fee. If you dreamed of sailing a boat through clear water, it meant good fortune. If the water turned dark, you might fear death. It's funny. Your modern mind would probably blame that on spicy dinner, but to them, the gods spoke through every dream's ripple. As you move between these doorways, you catch sight of a young girl placing a dab of honey on her lips before bed. Honey was thought to sweeten the breath, pleasing the gods so they'd guard your soul overnight. It sounds silly, but a hopeful silly, the kind of ritual that makes sleep feel safer, less like a plunge into darkness. There's a strange practice recorded in a village temple. Some people laid a reed mat over a shallow basin of water before sleeping. The water cooled the mat, making the night more bearable, but they also believed the water trapped evil spirits underneath so they couldn't rise into dreams. Scholars still can't agree if this was widespread or a local quirk, since only a few fragile scraps of writing mention it. You imagine lying down on that water cooled mat, the clay basin below you, half believing that anything might be possible if it meant a quiet mind. Egypt was hot even after dark, and you'd do just about anything to keep from tossing all night, fighting off the sticky air. The night deepens further, wrapping you like a warm but scratchy linen sheet. You pass by a pile of old palm leaves stacked against a mud brick wall, catching their dry, dusty aroma. Some Egyptians stuffed these leaves into pillows to keep scorpions away. Whether it worked, you don't know, but at least it gave them a sense of control over the night. You pause to rest on a low step, rubbing your eyes, trying to piece together these layers of magic and medicine. Maybe that was the genius of Egypt. They never saw a barrier between prayers, herbs, and charms. Everything worked together, a soft net to catch you as you fell into dreams. Your mind drifts to those cat guardians again, small, sleek, half god, half housemate. Cats probably curled up beside countless Egyptian dreamers, warm and purring, scaring off mice and nightmares. Even if you hate cats, you'd probably be grateful for one in a world where anything could slip into your dreams. A laugh bubbles in your throat. You wonder what an ancient Egyptian would say about a modern white noise machine or a lavender pillow spray. They'd probably think you were casting spells, and in a way, you are, trying to soothe your mind with a ritual just like theirs. Your shoulders sag, the poppy honey finally tugging gently at your thoughts. The night seems to breathe with you now, slower, softer, its ancient rhythms folding you in. You hear another lullaby in the distance, a man singing to no one, maybe to the gods themselves. And in that quiet, you sense a shared truth across the centuries. We all fear the dark. We all want to wake up safe. And we all chase sleep like a fragile miracle. You rise again, the night wrapping your shoulders like a thin cloak, woven from breeze and shadow. Your eyelids droop a little more with every step, the honey in your stomach slowly tugging you toward dreams, though not quite there yet. You wander past houses gone silent, their flickering lamps snuffed out one by one, leaving only the soft glow of stars to guide you. Ahead, a temple gate stands partly open, guarded by statues of lion-headed Sekhmet. She's fierce by day, but by night even the gods seem to rest. You peek inside, half expecting to see priests dozing in corners, but the incense still burns in a thick column of fragrant smoke, a night offering to protect sleepers from evil spirits. Egyptians believed even gods needed to be asked politely to stand guard, and maybe you'd trust that too, after living in a world where scorpions scuttle through your bed. One reliable bit of truth is that temples often served as places of healing sleep, what we might call sleep clinics today. People with stubborn insomnia or terrifying dreams could stay in temple beds, where priests chanted massaged herbs into their skin and guided them toward peaceful rest. The hope was that the gods would send a healing vision, a dream message that soothed both mind and body. That practice still baffles historians, who argue whether temple sleep was for everyone or mostly for higher ranking officials. The evidence is patchy, but you can picture it: a line of worried souls waiting to lay down their burdens in sacred rooms, hoping the gods would cradle them until dawn. You slip out of sight of Sekhmet's statues, back onto a street lined with cracked pottery and the faintest perfume of date wine gone sour. Your feet ache, your shoulders sag, but your thoughts stay awake, always picking at scraps of worry. Egyptians might have recognized you, a mind that won't rest, no matter how tired the body grows. You pause under a fig tree, the branches rattling in a breeze that smells faintly of earth and river. A cat darts across your path, tail flicking, eyes shining green in the lamplight. Maybe it's on night watch, keeping the darkness honest. You wish you could borrow its confidence, its calm, its absolute sense of belonging. There's a small side story you remember hearing. A fisherman once claimed that if you sprinkled sand from the river's edge across your mat, you would dream of a safe journey through the underworld. It makes sense in a strange way. The Nile was Egypt's highway, its heart, and if you trusted it by day, why not trust it by night? Scholars still debate whether that was a true folk practice or just a bedtime superstition, but it's beautiful to imagine. You sigh, leaning against a mud brick wall, your body finally starting to let go. The songs of insects rise around you, rhythmic, hypnotic, an ancient version of white noise. You'd almost trade your modern fan for that sound, soft, organic, woven through the night. Your thoughts wander to the scribes who wrote entire dream books, carefully noting which visions meant hope, which spelled disaster. A crocodile in a dream, bad omen. A snake, depends on the snake's color. A child laughing, a blessing. It's oddly comforting to think that even 5,000 years ago, people woke up trying to make sense of their nighttime stories. You take another step, your limbs heavy, your mind swaying between this world and the one waiting behind your closed eyes. The poppy honey finally feels like a warm hand pulling you gently inward, away from lamp smoke and night breezes, toward a quieter place inside. For just a moment, you imagine lying down on a reed mat, blue lotus oil dabbing your temples, the chant of a temple priest drifting through half-open doors. You'd sink into dreams carried on the river, knowing there would always be something, a god, a cat, a simple prayer to help guide you home. You slip deeper into the Egyptian night, your steps softer now, as if even your bones are ready to rest. The wind has calmed, leaving only the hush of sleeping birds tucked into the crevices of mud brick walls. You feel the poppy honey's warmth working through you, a gentle heaviness that turns the world slow, almost dreamy. Past another doorway, you glimpse a family asleep on a woven mat, their heads resting close together, like nesting birds. A clay lamp burns low beside them, barely aglow, just enough to keep the dark from swallowing them whole. They trust in their charms, in a protective God hovering unseen, and in their simple rituals to hold back the nightmares. You stand there for a moment, breathing in that hush, feeling your shoulders loosen. One solid historical truth is that ancient Egyptians feared night terrors, what they called the wandering sickness of sleep. They described it in scrolls as a kind of spirit that pinned you down, stole your breath, and left you waking in panic. Sound familiar? It's eerily like what modern people call sleep paralysis. Their answer was to draw protective images on amulets, wrap them around the wrists, and chant a short prayer to banish the shadow. Maybe you'd want one of those amulets yourself after hearing that. And there's a side detail to make you grin. Some healers recommended that you spit 3 times over your left shoulder before lying down to drive away these nighttime attackers. You can just imagine someone in the pitch dark trying not to spit on their own pillow. Historians still debate if this was a widely followed ritual or a local village charm, but it's so human it feels true. You keep walking a slow pace now, as if each step might dissolve into a dream. Past a small courtyard, you notice herbs drying on a clay shelf: mint, thyme, crushed henna leaves. The woman who lives here probably blends them into a nighttime tea, simmering the pot until the scent drifts through the entire house. Egyptians believed mint cooled a fevered mind, and thyme drove out nightmares. The blend smells sharp, green, a welcome contrast to the sticky heat of evening. Your own mouth waters, thinking of a warm drink before bed. You pause, closing your eyes, listening to the far-off croak of a frog from the riverbank. In a way, it's a lullaby, steady, rhythmic, ancient. You feel its pattern sink into you, slowing your thoughts. You find another low step to rest on, the stone still holding the less memory of sunlight, its warmth a quiet comfort against your legs. For a moment, the world seems perfectly still. You picture yourself laying down a linen pillow, maybe sprinkling it with a drop of blue lotus oil, breathing deep, letting each breath pull you closer to the place behind your eyelids where dreams wait. A silly bit of folklore bubbles up in your memory. People once believed a dream could be stolen if you left your shoes pointing the wrong way by the bed. Shoes needed to face out toward the door so your spirit wouldn't get lost on its way back to your body. You try not to laugh, because you know even now you'd probably check them twice if you lived here. Your mind drifts on that final edge of wakefulness, thoughts like soft feathers brushing past. The distant Nile flows steady and calm, echoing your own slowing heartbeat. Around you, Egypt sleeps, the city breathing as one, a million tiny dreams layered together like reeds woven into a mat. And you realize you belong to that same ancient wish: to rest, to let go, to trust that you will rise again in the morning with your spirit intact. You stand again, slowly, as if the night has wrapped around your knees, making each motion a gentle ritual. The hush of Egypt seeps into your bones, a balm against the raw edges of sleeplessness. You move past a crumbling courtyard wall where someone has scrawled a tiny prayer in faded paint, a plea for peace in sleep, its words worn down by time and dust. You reach out to trace the letters, wondering if they still hold any power. Maybe they do, if only because they remind you that someone else, long ago, feared the same dark you do. Your feet slide softly along the packed earth, guiding you toward another street where a breeze stirs papyrus leaves, their dry whisper like pages turning in a book. You pass doorways with reed mats hanging across them to keep scorpions from sneaking in while families sleep. Little protections, woven with care and a hint of desperation, because in this world, anything could slip through the cracks. One certain truth is that Egyptians thought dreams were messages from the gods. Entire priestly classes trained to read them, interpreting symbols and telling worried dreamers whether a vision was a blessing or a curse. You'd probably book an appointment yourself if you saw a crocodile dancing through your dreams, just in case. There's an odd, half funny legend buried in a scroll. A farmer claimed his wife dreamed of fish, and that meant she was planning to run away. The priest told him to make an offering to Hathor and let her sleep under a rose scented cloth to sweeten her heart. Whether it worked is lost to time, but scholars still argue whether this fish dream fear was a common anxiety or just one scribe's joke. You move on, the rose scented cloth dancing through your mind, and find yourself by a low wall near a storage shed. The air smells of barley and dried onions, the foundation of countless Egyptian meals. You picture the families who lay down after a meal of bread and beer, so full their minds might settle more easily into dreams. Food was another medicine, a comforting weight in the belly to help quiet the mind. Your own stomach rumbles, half jealous of their simplicity. A piece of warm bread, a cup of date wine, a prayer to Bess. Maybe that was all they needed. You'd probably still be scrolling your phone, worrying about tomorrow, while they slept side by side in a row of reed mats, trusting their gods to stand guard. You pause near a well, its water dark and deep. Egyptians respected wells, believing their depths connected to the underworld. Dropping a pinch of herbs in the bucket was thought to keep away bad spirits. You wonder if they'd think your modern faucet was magic, a godlike stream that never stopped. A faint rustle makes you turn. Just a goat shifting in its pen, stirring the dust. Its steady breathing reminds you again of the simple lullabies woven through this land, rhythms so old they might as well be etched in your own heart. You take another step, letting the poppy honey tug at your mind, pulling you closer to surrender. The night feels heavy now, as if it wants to carry you itself, rocking you in a cradle of starlight and frog song. You stand in the middle of the street, breathing in the warm, ancient air, thinking of all the ways people have ever tried to calm their hearts. Prayers, herbs, music, silly superstitions. They were never guaranteed, but they meant you weren't alone in your fears. Your eyes slip closed for a second, and you sway, balanced between here and the soft nowhere of sleep. In that fragile moment, you understand why Egyptians believed the soul needed protection. If dreams are a journey, you'll want guides for the road. You breathe a little deeper, letting the night air settle into your chest as though you could drink it, letting it rinse away the tangles of your mind. Each footstep feels slower now, weighed down by the gentleness of sleep's creeping closer. You pause near a doorway where a family rests, their heads turned in unison toward a tiny clay lamp, as if its small glow might shield them from anything lurking in their dreams. You marvel at how a single flame, fluttering and imperfect, could stand between a human heart and the endless dark. Maybe it was the same for you, a nightlight by your bed or the hum of your phone screen, some small glow that promises you're safe. One certain truth is that Egyptians saw sleep as a moment when the world was reborn. Their myths told of the sun god Ra sailing through the underworld each night, fighting monsters so that dawn could return. Every time you closed your eyes, they believed you were reenacting that brave voyage, hoping you'd rise again in the morning. You can almost feel Ra's boat passing somewhere far beyond your sight, cutting through your own tangled thoughts, keeping you afloat. And there's an odd detail from a priest's diary. He described a spell involving sprinkling beer foam across the sleeping mat to quiet a child's night cries. You'd think he was drunk himself, but people truly trusted even the simplest substances to calm a troubled mind. Scholars argue whether it was serious magic or a cozy bedtime habit. But in a world so unpredictable, who could blame them for trying? You drift closer to the Nile again, hearing its steady hush as it pushes against the riverbank. Its water carries the promise of tomorrow, another sunrise, another chance to wake whole. You feel your own heart beating, a steady reminder that even in the night, your body keeps watch for you. Past the river's edge, reeds sway under a faint breeze, their rhythmic rustle as soothing as a lullaby. If you were brave enough, you'd lay down right there on the damp grass, trusting the water to lull you, trusting the gods to guard you, trusting the cat curled by your feet to chase away nightmares. You step forward again, each movement sinking deeper into the comfort of the night. Egypt feels ageless, patient, willing to rock you to sleep the way it has rocked generations. The same prayers, the same herbs, the same silly charms, all repeated for thousands of years, because in the end, sleep is still a mystery that asks for gentleness. Your eyes close again, the honey pulling you under, and you remember the chanting voices of the priests, the dry sweetness of blue lotus, the faint perfume of thyme, all these small gifts woven together, daring you to trust that tomorrow will come, that dreams will pass gently, that you will rise again with the sun. You let the last threads of worry fall away, the sounds of Egypt cushioning you, until the only thing left is the beating of your own heart, steady as a drum, guiding you across Ra's River toward the far shore of morning. Now, let everything soften. The night has carried you so far through Egypt's gentle shadows, and you can feel the weight of those ancient dreams finally letting you rest. Take a deep breath and let it fill every quiet space inside you, like a calm river slipping through your chest. Feel your shoulders loosen, your thoughts slow, your body surrendering to a peaceful, drowsy calm. You picture the Nile, silver under starlight, moving with a slow, endless rhythm. That current can carry your worries away if you let it, lifting them from your mind so there is nothing left but stillness. Imagine the cool breeze brushing your cheeks, the faint perfume of blue lotus rising in the night air, comforting and warm. Hear the echoes of distant chanting, so soft they might as well be the beating of your own heart, steady and faithful. Let those ancient prayers guard you like a line of calm voices surrounding your bed, promising you that no harm will come while you sleep. Your breath grows deeper, smoother, and you feel the last flickers of wakefulness drifting away, carried downstream like a reed boat. There is no rush now, no harsh edges, no dark corners left to fear. The night folds over you, gentle as linen, protecting you in a place where even your dreams can rest. You have traveled far tonight, and you have earned this peace, woven from ancient herbs, soft melodies, and the blessing of 1,000 sleeping hearts before you. Allow your mind to dim, your body to sink deeper into comfort, each breath more quiet than the last. You are safe here, guided by the soft hand of history, free to sleep. Good night.